video for you today. We are going to be ranking all of my Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes. Again, this is an updated video. I did a ranking video about 2 years ago, and right after I did that video, she seemed to release a whole slew of eyeshadow palettes that I have since added to my collection. I have 8 of her mini palettes and then 10 of her mid-sized palettes, so we're going to rank them all today. I actually have a new #1 in both the mid-sized and the mini palettes, so this should be very, very fun. Before we get into that though, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to do that, and also make sure that your notifications are turned on. And with that said, let's just jump right into the palettes. First, we're gonna go through her mini palettes. I have 8 of them. We're gonna rank them from least favorite to my most favorite. These are $27 a piece. I love these palettes because they're very portable, travel friendly, and although they're kind of expensive for how much product you get in these palettes, I find the $25 to $30 price tag to be a really good kind of gift amount. Maybe you're gifting something for someone in your life that loves makeup, or just for yourself. This is a really good price tag on something. I am going to be inserting swatches of everything. So if you are in the market for a Natasha Denona eyeshadow palette, or have wanted to try one out, not sure which one to try out because they are very expensive, but hopefully this video will help you out in case you are in the market for yourself or for a gift for someone else. So let's start with my 8 mini palettes, starting all the way down at the bottom at number 8. For that, I'm gonna go with my Mini Love palette. This is a really great palette, and I hesitated to rank this one as low as I did simply for this lid shimmer right here, which is such a stunning lid shimmer. You guys know I love anything that's in this realm of like a champagne or a shell pink or a light kind of not too yellowy gold. I love shades like that on my lid, and some of her palettes don't include those type of shades, so I do love that. However, everything else in this palette, although I do still like it, is very pink and purple. It's a very colorful look that you get out of this mini palette. It's just more colorful than I like to reach for on a daily basis, and if I'm in the mood of kind of berry tones, although I consider these a little bit more bold than just a basic berry tone that leans more of like a mauve berry. It's a bit more of a statement eye, I guess I should say. Ranked at number 7, that's gonna be the Mini Zendo palette. Again, great formulas. You get 2 mattes in here, you get 3 shimmers, a really beautiful silver, which I absolutely love. I just don't find myself reaching for shades like this as often. Maybe I need to start forcing myself to do that, so I don't get too boring and kind of stagnant in the makeup looks that I do. But that's another one that's just as beautiful as it is, as nice as the color story is. It just is a little bolder, a little bit more colorful than I reach for on a regular basis. Okay, coming in at number 6, we're gonna go with the Mini Glam palette. This palette is actually grown on me a little bit. I believe in the last video where I ranked these mini palettes, I think this one came in last because I felt like the color story was just not as warm as I was hoping it to be. But I pulled this out more recently, and I actually kind of like this one now. I don't know. Again, I think this might just be as my preferences are changing as I'm getting a little bit older. I find neutrals, particularly warmer neutrals, but non-bold colors to kind of be what I just like to reach for on an everyday. And there are some really great shades in here. I love this matte brown. It's just such a good staple color. You have a good, nice, warm champagne that's not overly gold. It's beautiful. And then just some basic bronzes, a good transition shade. It's a good staple palette, especially if you like things that lean more neutral, that aren't overly warm. Ranked at number 5, I'm gonna go with the Starlit palette. This is one of her newer mini eyeshadow palettes. I really like this one. This shade right here, you guys, is actually a repeat shade. It's also included in her mini retro palette, which you'll see that palette closer to the top. It's one of my favorites, and I love that shade. It's just a very sheer, very sparkly kind of glitter topper shade. But the glitters, while they're sheer, they're punchy. I mean, these are not weak by any means. It's a beautiful, beautiful color and formula. It definitely leans more on the pink side. And I'm actually really grateful to have this shade duplicated because I have a pretty massive dent in this shade in my mini retro palette, and I'm afraid I'm gonna run out of that. So I'm happy to have a backup here. I know some people were kind of annoyed by that when they saw a duplicate because she doesn't often do duplicate shades in her palettes, but I don't mind that so much. This is a much more softer, leaning, colorful color story than the ones that I ranked at the bottom, the Love and the Zendo. The mauves are a little bit more soft and muted. You have this beautiful kind of corally, it looks very light in the pan in my very bright lights. Kind of a lighter tone, fleshy pink, but it's a really beautiful color and formula. I really like this palette. I think it's really nice. Well curated. You get a good range from light to dark, matte to shimmer, and create some really beautiful eye looks. For my number 4 mini palette, I'm gonna go with my Mini Nude. You guys, this palette is so beautiful. This palette is the most beautiful warmer toned nudes. I absolutely love these type of shades on me in particular. I just think warmer tones look better on me. They tend to warm up my face, especially as I'm getting older, because I feel like my face alone without any makeup looks kind of dull and gray and lifeless, and these kind of shades just really bring life to my eyes and to the rest of my face. I love it. It's a beautiful color story. You get a cooler bronze and a warmer kind of coppery bronze that's not too red or too orange, which I appreciate. Perfect transition shade, a nice dark rich warm brown, and of course a perfect champagne for the eyelid. This is one of the most perfectly curated palettes. If I'm traveling, especially in the summertime when I like to do more warm kind of bronzy looks, I take this with me all the time. For number 3, I'm gonna go with my mini retro. I believe this might have been in my top 1 or 2 the last time I did this video. It's still pretty high. I do have a new favorite now, but I still love this one. It's a great color store. If you like something that just gives you the tiniest drop of color in your eye looks, you get these kind of slightly green toned grays. These shades are the exact same color of my eyes, which are basically gray. So they look really nice on my eyes. And sometimes I'll just go with the basic pinks, maybe a little bit of this darker, it's not that dark, this kind of grayish green in the outer corner. It's absolutely lovely. They have the perfect amount of green in them because I normally don't like gray eyeshadow that's too charcoaly or too cool toned. These are definitely cool toned, but that touch of kind of green makes them look a little bit more earthy and natural on the eyes. I absolutely love the formulas of these. These 2 shimmers right here, again, this is the repeat shade that was in the Starlit palette that I absolutely love. I don't know if you guys can see the dent in this. I mean, I'm definitely gonna hit pan on this very, very soon. I also love this shade, which has a good amount of sparkle in it. It's kind of a silvery tone. And then you have a good basic metallic peachy pink here. That's lovely as well. This creates some of the prettiest, naturally colorful eye looks ever. It's fantastic. And number 2 is the one that used to sit at number 1. That is my Mini Biba. This palette is so good. One of my very favorite things about this mini palette is the fact that she included one of her creamier formulas in here, her cream to powder formula. I love that formula, especially for my dry eyelids. It looks amazing on my eyelids. It just applies and blends beautifully, adds a touch of hydration, but it's not gonna move around very much. It's barely creamy. It's not a true cream in the way that like the Huda Beauty creams are, but I love this color story. I didn't think that I would when I first bought this because it looked so kind of peachy pink, but I'm finding that peachy pinks look so good on me, and you'll kind of see a pattern here when we get to my larger palettes, that is just kind of a direction I've been leaning lately. I love warmer brownish neutrals, peachier neutrals, and berry tones. Those are kind of the shades I find just are classic. They never fail me. They always look good no matter what I'm wearing. And that's how I feel about this palette. It looks more colorful in the pan than it does on the eyes. It just goes really well with anything, and the formulas are all amazing. And last, this one actually surprised me that this is coming in at number 1. It is the My Mini Dream palette. This is her newest mini release, I believe. And I love this palette so much. Now, I don't usually like neutrals that lean on the cooler side, but these ones have just enough taupe and kind of like pink or brown in them that they just look really flattering on the eyes. They're not overly ashy. They're so pretty. And this creates the most perfectly done eye look. You have a really dark matte shade right here. You have a really light transition shade for those of you with more fair skin and one that's more kind of medium tone. This shade right here is called Nurture, and I believe it's Natasha's very favorite shade of all time. And I understand why. It's very versatile. I imagine it would work on both fair skin and deeper skin tones. Obviously, you're going to use it for different things depending on what your skin tone is like. But again, all around, this is a great palette. You have a light shimmer, kind of a mid-tone shimmer that's not too dark. It creates such pretty eye looks. This is one that I now take with me a lot when I travel. I think I've only had it for about 3 months now, and I am surprised at how much I reach for this thing. Now for her mid-size palettes. Her mid-size palettes are $69 a piece. I believe these are all still available. Maybe not on Sephora, but I think if you go directly to Natasha Denona's website, you should be able to find all of these there. And we're gonna start with my least favorite. And for that, I have to go with the pastel palette. I do enjoy this palette. It's a really fun, colorful eyeshadow palette when I'm in the mood for color and being a little bit creative, which again, I'm finding to be less and less these days, but this is a fun one to pull out. And although it looks very intimidating, I mean, these look very bold. There is not a neutral to be found inside here. Surprisingly, because they lean a little more pastel, they're more wearable than you would first imagine. I did just do a video I actually used the Alter Ego dupe of this palette, which they just came out with, which by the way is pretty much identical both in color and formula. So if you maybe have been wanting to try out color and not sure where to start, I'm gonna link that video for you guys right here in case you missed it. But this is a really fun one. It's just not one that I reach for on a daily basis, as you might imagine. Ranked at number 9, we're gonna go with my bronze palette. This is such a great palette. It's so beautiful. The one thing I hold against this palette, there is not a light shimmer or even a light matte in here. Everything is just kind of like in that mid-tone range with a couple of deeper tones. And don't get me wrong, they're gorgeous, especially for someone that likes your warm tones. I mean, this is a very warm palette, which I absolutely love. It's rich and beautiful, but I just find because that one shade is missing, I can't get a complete look out of this palette alone. Now I know that I could swap things around, which if I didn't do YouTube, I probably would do that just for my own personal use. But because I sometimes pull these palettes out and want to reference them in videos, I want to make sure they're accurate representations of what you actually get. But just so you know, you can swap shades around. These are all magnetic, so they have these little holes in the back. You just take a pin and kind of pop the pan out and swap things around if you wanted to do that. So basically any type of bronzy eye you would ever want to create, this palette will give you, with the exception of that lighter shade, which I always need on my lid, which again is why this one ranks a little bit lower. It's a beautiful palette. I do use it quite a bit still, but I always have to pull another shade out to go along with this one, which just annoys me a little bit when you're spending $69 on an eyeshadow palette, but that might just be me. Ranked at number 8, I'm gonna go with my Zendo palette. This is a really fun palette to play with if you like a bit of color that isn't super bold. There are some shades in here that are quite bold. I mean, some of these tills can get quite bold, but I actually think they're all pretty wearable. You have a nice bright red here, but I don't mind a pop of red in the crease if I'm pairing it with some kind of peaches and some like neutral shimmers. I love this duochrome shimmer here, and I love this matte kind of white-based sea foam color right here. It is so pretty as an inner corner shade or as a lid shade. It's a very fun palette to play with. This one also gives you some of her cream to powder formulas that I love so much. By the way, I don't think I mentioned that, but you do get that in most of her, I think maybe all of her mid-size palettes have that formula in them, including this one. These two are that creamy formula, and I think you even get a couple in the pastel palette as well. I absolutely love it for my older eyelids. It's very forgiving on the eyes. It just kind of smooths out everything and makes everything in that outer corner that can be so crepey blend really well on top of all the lines that I'm getting as I get older. So again, really fun one if you like a bit of kind of peachy pink and some browns and some teals. You like to be a little bit creative without going too crazy or out of the box. This is a good one. For number 7, we're gonna go with the Sunrise palette. For a long time, this was maybe one of my very favorite palettes from her. It's still such a good one. This is like a vibrant berry toned palette with some summery yellows. It's very fun. It looks more intimidating than it actually is. I know I've mentioned a lot lately that my eyeshadow preferences are kind of changing as I get older, and I don't find myself wanting to reach for bold colors, but this is one of the palettes that I will make an exception for, particularly when it's summertime. This palette just gets me in the mood for summer. It's kind of a like seasonal palette for me. You obviously could wear it any time of the year, but these tones just really remind me of like a summer sunset. It's a fun one to play with. You can create some really beautiful eye looks that are still more neutral than you would think looking at these in the pan. This might be the only one that doesn't include any of her cream to powder formulas, but I still love the color story and love the looks that you can create with these yellows and peaches and berries. Okay, we're into my top 6. This is where things get really hard. Some of these were really tricky to kind of pick between. Anyways, for number 6, I'm gonna go with my retro palette. I hate ranking this at number 6 because it is one of my all-time favorite palettes, and I love berry tones, and this is the best berry tone palette that I own. So why is it ranking so low? Because there's so many other palettes that I love as well. But if you are into berry tones and pinks, you're gonna love this palette. It is so good. You do get some neutrals in here, which I really appreciate, especially when using berry tones. I like to combine berry tones with some neutrals. Even like a cooler kind of smoky brown like this pairs beautifully with some reds. It creates the most like pretty purpley, deep, rich shade in the outer corner. I love the shimmers that you get in here for the lid. They're so pretty and multi-dimensional. These two look similar to each other in the pan, but this one has more of a blue sparkle shift, whereas this one is more of like a golden kind of shift to the sparkle. They're stunning on the eyes. This is a palette that I often reach for when I'm doing someone's makeup for like prom or something, or a special occasion. This thing looks stunning for a special occasion. It's just very, very dressy and classy and glamorous. Another thing about this palette that I love so much is the fact that it includes a matte white. I love a matte white in a palette, especially a really good formula matte white, and this is one of those. Look at this, you guys. Look at that pigment. A shade like this, while I don't often wear it on its own, put this on the inner part of your lid, or maybe if you have like a really deep shadow right there, you can add this there to kind of brighten up your lid and then put a shimmer on top of it. It adds so much versatility to any palette, and I love that they included it in this one. Really great one. I hate to rank it at number 6, but there's some stiff competition coming up. And that starts with this palette right here. This is the Yucca palette. This is another palette that I kind of consider to be a seasonal palette. This is the quintessential fall palette for me, but man, you guys, this thing blew me away. It reminds me of the Tribe palette from Juvia's Place, which has been discontinued, and I loved that palette. I still have it. I love that palette so much, but it has more variety, and it's in the Natasha Denona formula that I love. I love the shades in here. They are so fun, but they're not wild or crazy. I mean, maybe with the exception of this lemony, kind of like limey green, which is so bright, it's not even showing up in my lights. This thing is like a neon green, but it's kind of fun to put on your inner corner. You might be looking at this thinking, okay, well, there's not like a light champagne in there, but these shades right here look quite, including that one right there, which is just shy of being the type of yellow shimmer that doesn't look good on me, that I don't like. It has something different about it that still looks flattering on me, even though these type of shades I don't usually gravitate towards. But these are just so perfectly done. I love the multi-dimension in some of these shimmers. They're very interesting colors that are kind of different and fun, but everything's still kind of neutral in here. It's a really fun palette to play with, especially if you love fall and you love fall tones in eyeshadows, like you get in the mood to wear fall eyeshadows. This is one of the most perfect fall palettes I think I've ever seen creative, and I have a lot. Now for number 4, I'm gonna go with my Glam palette. This used to be my number 1 palette from Natasha Denona. Slowly been notched down a little bit as she's come out with a couple others that I absolutely love. However, this is still a fantastic palette, especially if you don't like the warmer tones that like lean more on the warm side. These all lean more in the neutral area with a couple of cool tones mixed in. However, I still like this palette because you do get some pinks and kind of peaches in here that make it more wearable for me as someone that doesn't usually like grayer or cooler tones. It's a very well curated palette. It has some of her most beautiful lid shimmers in my opinion of all of her palettes. They are absolutely stunning. Great formulas in here. However, this one also does not include one of her cream to powder formulas. That's one thing that would make this palette just a little bit better. But as far as the color story, especially if you are someone that is pretty basic in the eye looks that you like to create, you don't like anything overly colorful or warm or anything that's going to kind of pull to yellowy or orange on you, nothing in here is going to do that. They all are very, very neutral, very wearable, very glamorous. You get some really sparkly shades in here that can really elevate a look. Such a fantastic palette, especially for those of you that are a little bit more simple with your eyeshadows. Okay, my number 3 palette, this used to be ranked at number 1, but I have replaced it with 2 of my others. That is my Retro Glam palette. This again is a palette for those of you that don't mind playing with a little bit of color. You get quite a bit of greens in here, but these are such fun greens. They are kind of minty, which I never would have thought that I liked mint toned. I'm very picky when it comes to like greens and blues. They're not the right tone of green or blue. They're going to scare me away, but these ones actually look really beautiful on the eyes and they don't look overly bold. I also love the mix in here of pinks and kind of very neutral browns and the green tones. It's a really fun mix of colors that you can mix and match some of those different types of shades together and create some really interesting eye looks that aren't over the top or overly kind of cotton candy looking. Although, let's be honest, you probably could get a pretty good cotton candy look out of this palette if you just kind of focused on those shades right there. The colors are in here are great. You get a couple of cream to powders, including this shade right here, which is so nice and rich. You guys see what I mean? It's green, but it's kind of like more like a grayish teal. I don't know, that you blend this into your eye and it just kind of looks more gray. Do you guys see that? Where it's not too bold. It's a really fun palette. I wasn't sure that I would like this one. In fact, initially I held off on buying this until I went into a Sephora store and swatched it and saw some of these shades in person and realized, you know what? I actually would wear those. And I'm so happy I did because it has become one of my favorites over the last couple of years. Ranked at number 2 is the My Dream palette. Now this one has slowly grown on me and overtaken. I think I got this one before I got the Retro Glam, but it has grown on me the more I have used it. You get plenty of neutrals in here, some really beautiful lid shades, one a little bit more pink and one more peachy. You get a couple of duochromes in here that are really interesting, and some beautiful richness in these shades right here. This creates some of the most beautiful eye looks that surprise me. Every time I use this palette, I'm always wowed by the looks that I create with it. And I find myself reaching for this more and more when I'm in the mood for these tones, these kind of peachy berry tones. This is one of the palettes that I'll reach for the most. It's a great date night palette when you want to be a little bit more creative or do something a little bit different that's still within that kind of sort of neutral range. You do get a handful of neutrals in here as well. You get some warm tones, kind of some cooler tones. You get a nice rich black. If you guys like a black, holy smokes. I mean, this thing is like, look at this. That's insane. It's just a really interesting palette. There's some really interesting takes on some classic shades in here that are different than what I've seen in any of my other palettes from her or from anyone else for that matter. By the way, the packaging on this one, I know I said that the Retro Glam palette is probably my favorite. This is a very close second. This is very, very cute. It reminds me of my old days playing with Photoshop and brushes in Photoshop, like grunge brushes. Just very like early 2000s to me. I love it. And that leaves me with my number one palette. What has replaced it? It has got to be the I Need a Nude palette. This is perhaps the most perfect Mandy Lee palette of all time. It's a neutral palette that leans ever so slightly warm, but not like a warm brown tone. These are more kind of pinkish brown tones that I absolutely love. This is like a larger, more expansive and versatile version of my Nabla Cutie Nude palette that I rave about all the time, that I love so much. It is absolutely stunning. The colors in here, the finishes in here. There's some really interesting finishes in here that were newer to her repertoire. There's some sparkly sheer lid toppers in here in every tone. I mean, you get this color, which I'm wearing, by the way, this is the one that I'm wearing on my eyes today. This is what I'm wearing on my lid today, and it's this very liquefied, metallic kind of champagne, gold and silver at the same time. I can't explain the tone of this shade. I mean, it even has a little bit of like a pink sparkle in it. It is just stunning. And that's not the only one. There are so many shimmers in here that just are gonna knock your socks off. You get these beautiful kind of pinks, some basic neutrals, and these, I know these three colors kind of look the same in the pan. They're not on the eyes. They're all quite different on the eyes. And then of course you get a deep brown, seemingly boring, but honestly you can just create the most beautiful eye looks out of this that are perfect for every day or a special occasion. The most perfect range from light to dark, and the most variety of finishes of any of her mid-size palettes that I own. I just think she knocked it out of the park with this palette. I was surprised at how much I love this one. Again, this is one that I kind of considered not buying because I felt like it was kind of a, if you were to marry the retro palette with the glam palette, you would get this. I actually kind of still agree with that, but nothing in here is a dupe. They're all very unique. They're all stunning, and I love reaching for this palette so much. It's the most perfect neutral palette that I've ever tried. And that is going to do it, you guys. Those are my Natasha Denona palettes currently ranked. What did you guys think? Were you surprised by any of my modified rankings? Now, you guys might have noticed that I do not have her Xenon palette. That is the very kind of black and gray. I just didn't think I'd have much use for that one. I've mentioned over and over again, I don't really use black eyeshadow on myself. I don't like gray, kind of very ashy, cool tones like bluish grays. I don't like how they look on me, and that palette is full of them. I have gone over to the swatches of that palette though. There are some really impressive looking lid shimmers in that palette. I considered briefly picking that one up because they looked so pretty and different, but I just knew it was one that I would probably not use all the time. So I think I'll hold my ground on that one. I have a feeling if I bought it, it would just go the way of my Love palette. Just really not a palette for me, but let me know if you guys like that one. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful for you if you are in the market or looking into maybe getting a Natasha Denona palette, trying to decide which color story would suit you best. Hopefully these swatches in my descriptions gave you an idea of maybe what to start with. But that is gonna do it for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me give you one last reminder, if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so before you leave, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.